The sun rose over Cartel in bands of copper and rose gold. A planet of peace. Its twin moons watched silently over towering halls of white stone and mirrored glass. The Grand Convergence Dome shimmered in the morning light, housing over 10,000 humans from Earth diplomats, scientists, and cultural envoys. They had come not to debate or demand, but to listen. It was to be the largest peace summit in galactic history. For Earth, this was a moment of pride. Less than a century ago, the planet had been recovering from its last great conflict. Now, it stood shoulder to shoulder with species who had walked the stars for millennia. The invitation from the Zorth Dominion had been unexpected, but humanity had embraced it. After all, peace required courage, and Earth had plenty of that to give. The transmission began as scheduled. Bright lights flickered across feeds from Mars to Mercury. Families gathered in homes, schools, and plazas, watching as their sons, daughters, and leaders stepped onto a stage carved from ivory crystal. Ambassador Kira Lin began her speech with a smile. She never finished it. The screen cut to static. At first, everyone thought it was a technical error. A weather anomaly, maybe a solar flare. Then came the silence. Not a blank signal, no signal at all. The entire relay from Cartel vanished. Backup channels returned nothing. No pings. No traces in the Earth Space Council's command center. Silence fell heavier than gravity. Within the hour, reconnaissance drones were dispatched. Nearby listening stations were activated. The surrounding space was scanned 1,000 times. Cartel had gone dark. 16 hours later, the Galactic Concord issued a brief statement. A tragic accident occurred during the Human-Zorth Diplomatic Summit. We regret to report that there are no known survivors. No further details. No explanation. Earth's leaders requested a full investigation. The Zorth Dominion responded 3 days later with a 10-line statement. Translated in exact form, a ritual misunderstanding has led to unfortunate loss. We extend our formal condolences and consider the matter closed. On Earth, mourning turned into something deeper. Cities held vigils that lasted days. 10,000 lives lost, and not to war, not to plague, but to what the galaxy called a misunderstanding. People began to ask questions. Why was there no distress signal? Why was the Concorde so quick to move on? And why did the Zorth not permit recovery teams to land on Cartel? Then came the leak. A low-band transmission, intercepted by an automated Earth probe still operating near the Cartel sector. Blurry, fragmented, but unmistakable. The final seconds of Ambassador Lin's life. A roar of panic, a scream. Then, images Zorth warriors in ceremonial armor, storming the summit floor. Blades drawn. No warning, no misunderstanding. Humanity had not lost its people to chance. It had lost them to a deliberate act. The footage spread across Earth in hours. No officials released a statement. No need. The people saw everything they needed. In a quiet session the following morning, Earth's Unified Planetary Council convened. No live broadcast, no press. Just one message was sent to the Concorde: Earth withdraws. Effective immediately. The Zorath offered no apology. The Concorde expressed deep concern. The people of Earth sent no protests. They simply stopped. Waiting above the planet, old orbital foundries were powered back on. Long silent defense platforms began to rotate. Sleeper protocols, long thought ceremonial, were reactivated in every major fleet. For decades, Earth had worked to be better. Now, it would remember how to be strong, and across every corner of human space, the same phrase spread from voice to voice, system to system. No more forgiveness in the heart of Geneva Spire. Earth's center of global diplomacy, the banners of the Galactic Concorde were lowered for the last time. The wind caught the fabric and flared it wide before the poles retracted silently into the marble platform. The crowd gathered outside watched without speaking. No one cheered. No one clapped. The act didn't call for celebration. It called for finality after 2 generations of unity. Earth had officially severed its ties with the Galactic Council. Across human space, embassies closed their doors. Civilian exchanges were recalled. Concord ships were denied entry to Terran systems. What had once been a symbol of hope, the dream of lasting peace among the stars, had been stripped of meaning, not because Earth had failed to believe in peace, but because peace, it seemed, had no defense against silence and betrayal. In orbit above Earth, Defense Fleet Command awakened. For decades, it had been ceremonial, a relic of older times when Earth had feared itself as much as the stars. Its ships were sleek, but few. Its weapons polished, but rarely powered. Most officers had trained for protocol, not engagement, that changed in less than a week. On Luna, the foundries began casting alloyed hull plating day and night. Mars turned its equatorial factories to war production. So the shipyards over Titan, once dormant, roared back to life. AI-based defense matrices were pulled from cold storage and brought online. Their protocols reviewed, updated, and reinforced. They called it reactivation, but everyone knew what it truly was. Earth was preparing for something the galaxy had not seen in over a century: a unified human response. At Fleet Command, Admiral Leona Vance stood at the edge of the primary tactical display. A veteran of the last real conflict in soul space, she had seen what humanity was capable of when it believed it had no other option. She had hoped her time would be spent as a symbol, not a commander. But now, she was both. "They think we won't act," said Commander Thorne, her second in command. He stood with hands behind his back, face lit by the data feeds showing real-time activity across every Terran colony. Vance nodded slowly. "They think we'll mourn and move on." He hesitated. "We always did before." Her gaze didn't move. From the screen, "We've never lost 10,000 lives in one day. Not like this. Not under a banner of peace." Outside the command deck, a new class of destroyer exited its orbital cradle, sleek, angular, bearing no markings of peacekeeping duty, only the silver star of Earth, darkened at its core. It was not built for diplomacy. It was built for precision. Back on Earth, the public was not told to hate. The government released no message of vengeance. No threats were made. Instead, the people were given the facts, the footage, the words of the Zorth, the silence of the Concord. That was all. It was enough, and the Concord's core world's confusion spread. Earth had always been the steady one, the thoughtful one, the patient voice in a council of louder, older empires. Now that voice was gone, and in its place was only a deep, deliberate quiet. Some member species issued private condolences. Others sent envoys urging Earth to return and work through the pain. A few tried to pressure Earth into standing down. They were all met with the same response: "This is not your decision." From the edges of Sol to the void beyond the Kuiper Belt, something stirred. Earth had not raised its voice. It had not sent fleets beyond its reach, but the galaxy could already feel the shift. This was not a declaration of war. It was something colder, something final. And as the stars turned over Cartel's lifeless soil, the memory of what had been done there remained fixed in Earth's heart. Humanity would not rush into fire, but it would never again walk into a trap with open hands. The first response came in silence. No grand declaration. No military parade. It's just a single, anonymous relay that went dark in Zoroth space. Then a second. Then 12. By the time the Zoroth Dominion noticed the entire outer ring of their deep space monitoring grid had gone offline. They sent scout ships to investigate. None returned in the halls of the Dominion's high command. Theories ranged from solar interference to sabotage by rival species. No one, not even the most aggressive war. Advisors believed Earth could act so quickly. After all, humanity had always relied on diplomacy, never preemptive strikes. And even if they had changed, their military was decades behind the power of a warrior species like the Zorth. That assumption was the first. Miscalculation. Earth hadn't fallen behind. It had been preparing quietly for years. Deep within the Helix Belt, beyond the edge of known trade lanes, the Vanguard fleet assembled. Each vessel was cloaked in layered stealth mesh, absorbing light, sound, and signal. Their hulls bore no name, no flag-only silent matte black plating designed to vanish into the dark. The operation was simple in design, complex in execution. Disable, infiltrate, observe. The Zorath were not to be confronted, not yet. Instead, Earth struck at their infrastructure. Relay nodes, logistics hubs, private data arrays. The targets weren't military, they were informational. In a single week, over 39 Zoroth systems lost control of their internal networks. Supply shipments vanished. Resource extraction. Operations shut down mid-cycle. Communications dropped to a trickle, then stopped altogether. The Zoroth tried to trace the source. They found nothing. On board the command ship Resolute Shadow, Admiral Vance monitored the operation from deep space. In front of her, a digital map of Zoroth's territory pulsed with fading lights, each one a severed connection. Each one carefully chosen to avoid casualties. "This is measured," she said aloud, more to herself than to her officers. "We cut only where it hurts the machine, not the people." Her senior strategist, Commander Elias Dre, folded his arms. For now, Vance didn't answer. She didn't need to. Humanity's strength had never been in brute force. It was in adaptability, learning from every failure, planning through every silence. Earth had studied the Zoroth for decades. Their culture prized dominance. They equated restraint with weakness, and they believed Earth's compassion was a flaw. So Earth chose to speak in a language the Zoroth would finally understand: precision in one outer system. A Zoroth armory powered down, its energy reserves inexplicably drained. When guards arrived to investigate, they found no breach, no signs of battle. Just rows of weapons, clean, undisturbed, on a single message etched into a terminal. "Your strength is only a shadow. We are the light behind it." The message was traced back, layer by layer, across encrypted networks. It led to nothing. No signature, no origin, just silence. Back on Earth, the public saw none of these actions. No news broadcasts revealed the full scope of the operation. There were no leaks, no dramatic speeches, only a quiet promise from leadership: justice will come. Meanwhile, the Galactic Concord scrambled to understand what was happening. Member species sent diplomats to Earth, requesting dialogue. Some warned that unilateral action would destabilize the sector. Earth received them politely, listened, then declined. "We asked for unity when it mattered," Earth's prime delegate said. "We were told to be patient. Now we are acting. Not in rage, not in conquest, but in memory." In the shadows of uncharted space, Earth's message became clear. This was not retaliation. This was a demonstration. No force was being used against civilians. No worlds were being scorched. But for the Zoroth, the impact was undeniable. Their systems were exposed. Their silence had been answered with action, and they were no longer the ones in control. The Zoroth Dominion did not wait to be humbled. They believed in force as the final truth. And when control began slipping through their fingers, they did what they always had: assemble a fleet. 57 warships, each forged in the Dominion's central shipyards, each armed for total engagement. The armada launched from Zorth Prime and split into strike groups meant to sweep through their outer territories. Search for human forces, and eliminate them. Their ships were built to dominate by presence alone, towers of obsidian metal, armed with shockwave turrets and wide-area plasma drivers. To the Zorth, war was not won through precision, was won through fear. But they weren't chasing another empire. They were chasing shadows, in the void between stars. The resolute shadow tracked the enemy's fleet from a distance, cloaked. In darkness, Admiral Vance stood in the central command ring, watching as one by one her sensor technicians marked the movement of Zorath patrols. They're scattering, Commander Dre observed, arms crossed behind his back, trying to spread a net. It won't work, Vance said, voice steady. They don't understand what they're hunting. In an instant, Operation Quiet Spark was activated in a narrow corridor of empty space known as the Halen Drift. The first Zorath squadron encountered the unexpected. It began with a systems failure. Their long-range sensors glitched. Then their propulsion controls froze. At first, they suspected interference from solar radiation, but there was no nearby. Then, without warning, 2 of their frigates lost artificial gravity. Their decks folded into chaos. Crew members floated helplessly as their comm systems sparked and died. By the time the Zorath restored partial control, they were surrounded not by ships, but by silence. The attack came not from weapons, but from software. An invisible strike from Earth's adaptive AI units, each designed not to destroy, but to unravel. By the time Zorth Command regained contact, 9 ships had been disabled. No lives were taken, no hulls were breached. The only trace of Earth's involvement came from a repeating message found on each main screen. You do not see us. That is your failure. Across multiple sectors, similar events unfolded. One battlecruiser drifted into a minefield that hadn't existed the day before. Another lost control of its targeting system and accidentally fired on its own escort. Confusion spread through the Dominion's high command. Earth's forces were not meeting them. In open battle, you weren't attacking infrastructure anymore. They were watching, learning, interrupting, and worse, they were choosing not to kill. This shook the Zorath in ways no force ever had. In their culture, war was absolute. Mercy was foreign. Precision was weakness, but Earth was showing strength. Not through destruction, but through discipline. Back aboard the resolute Shadow, Vance watched the reports stream in. They'll call us cowards for this, she said, almost to herself. Let them, Dre replied. They can't fight what they can't reach. Vance nodded slowly, and they're beginning to understand that now. Meanwhile, on Zorth Prime, the High Warlord's War Council erupted in disagreement. Some demanded a full invasion of Earth's systems. Others suggested requesting intervention from the Galactic Concord. The Warlord sat in silence, in his hand. He held a data crystal one, delivered by a stealth drone that had landed in the center of the capital without being seen. It contained images, names, the full record of every human lost on Cartel, and a final statement. Written in Terran Standard, we have not struck in anger. We strike in memory, and we are not finished. Outside, the Zorath public was beginning to ask questions. Why? Were their leaders losing control? Who were these humans who fought without fire? And what came next? The galaxy held its breath. Earth had become the storm on the horizon unseen, but undeniably there. It didn't broadcast its intentions. It didn't boast of victories. It simply acted, and in doing so, it disrupted centuries of expectation. On distant worlds that once viewed Earth as a latecomer to the stars, questions began to spread. Could the same humans who had spoken of diplomacy and mutual progress now be the ones dismantling an empire? The Galactic Concord convened a special assembly. Delegates from over 60 species attended, some in person, others via holographic relay. Earth's seat sat empty, its crest dimmed. The Concord Chancellor opened with words of caution. "We face a moment of deep uncertainty," she said. "Earth's actions, while precise and bloodless so far, carry the weight of consequence. The structure of peace is at risk." But in private, many Concord leaders admitted what none dared say aloud. Earth had warned them, and they had done nothing. Among the Concord member worlds, the responses were divided. The Radari, a long-lived species with Earth, quietly began reinforcing their own systems, not in fear of Earth, but of what the Zorith might do. In desperation, the Deltari sent an encoded message to Earth's diplomatic relay. "We remember what you did for us during the Arvan Plague. We are not your enemy." Even the cautious Solari, known for centuries of neutrality, began quietly studying Terran military doctrine. Earth's reawakening had shaken the foundations of interstellar diplomacy, not with destruction, but with discipline. Meanwhile, on Earth, there were no celebrations. The people watched and waited. News networks offered careful updates, and social channels filled with debates. Was Earth doing the right thing? Could justice be found through disruption? But one truth united them. They had lost 10,000 souls. People who had come in peace, under flags of diplomacy, wearing no armor. And no one had answered for it now. Humanity was asking its question in a language the galaxy could not ignore. In the orbit of Jupiter, the Gauntlet Station served as the nerve center for Earth's strategic operations. From its reinforced hull, shaped like a ring of overlapping blades, Earth monitored nearly every sector of Zorith space. Inside its command hall, Admiral Vance stood before a wide projection of the galaxy, now dotted with a growing web of silent markers, evidence of every completed strike. "We haven't fired a single destructive shot," Commander Dre said. "And yet they're already calling us destabilizers." Vance didn't look away from the map. "Let them. Every system we disable, every fleet we disrupt, it's another reminder. We're not asking them to fear us. We're asking them to remember." Dre stepped forward, and if they don't, Vance turned. Her eyes were calm, resolute. "Then, we teach them what forgetting costs." Back on Zorith Prime, public unrest began to simmer. Civilians questioned why so many systems were losing contact. Rumors spread that Earth had penetrated their communications grid. Some even claimed Earth's drones had been spotted near the capital's orbit, completely undetected by defense systems. No one could confirm it, but no one could disprove it either. The High Warlord met with his council behind sealed doors. His tone was no longer filled with certainty. Even the most loyal generals had begun to whisper. Earth had not come to destroy. It had come to remind. And now, across the galaxy, worlds once comfortable in their distance from conflict were watching. Waiting. Not out of loyalty to the Concord. Not out of fear of the Zorath, but because Earth had changed and with it. The balance of power, in the silence between transmissions, in the shadowed corners of embassies and council halls. One question was asked more and more. What does Earth do next? And what happens when its patience finally ends? The day Earth arrived above Zorith Prime, there was no broadcast, no declaration, no final warning, just ships, thousands of them emerging from quantum slipstreams like shifting fragments of shadow. Each one silent, each one exact. Their formations were unbroken, their patterns fluid. The people of Zorith, watching from their cities and towers, had never seen Earth's warfleet before. They expected noise. They got silence. Zoroth's defense grid activated immediately. Orbital cannons rotated toward the dark shapes hovering just beyond atmosphere. Fleet Command ordered intercepts. Dozens of their own warships lifted off from high atmosphere bases. Then the grid shut down, one by one. Defense towers powered off. Cannons ceased tracking. The fleet's internal sensors went blind. Engines sputtered and halted mid-flight. It wasn't sabotage, it was full system control. Earth hadn't just arrived, it had already been here. For months, maybe longer. Earth's invisible strike teams had worked their way through the Zorath infrastructure. Communication hubs, sensor arrays, defense algorithms. All of it carefully studied, replicated, rewritten, now with a single transmission. Earth had taken control of it all. From his throne hall in the capital city of Vorthakel, the High Warlord stood facing a screen that now showed nothing but a rotating Terran emblem. His guards, confused, aimed their weapons at empty air. A soft tone chimed. A message appeared on the screen. We do not destroy what we can dismantle. Surrender your command. Justice begins now. The High Warlord clenched his jaw. Around him, his generals spoke over each other, demanding retaliation, retreat, negotiation, anything. But their voices blended into noise. He turned to his command officer. How many ships remain under our control? The officer looked down, ashamed. None, Warlord. The hall fell into silence. Above the planet, Earth's fleet didn't fire a single weapon. They simply waited. They didn't need to attack. The Dominion's power had already been disarmed. Back aboard the Resolute Shadow, Admiral Vance watched the feed from orbit, expression unreadable. Around her, officers monitored surface scans and communication. Records. Commander Dre approached. The Warlord's palace has gone dark. We estimate partial evacuation. Vance gave a small nod. Send in the tribunal team. Minimal footprint. Secure, not strike. Understood. Minutes later, drop pods left, orbits Maul, shielded and unarmed. They descended like falling stars, trailing blue light as they cut through the upper atmosphere. The Zorath capital did not resist. There was no battle, no defense. When Earth's tribunal units arrived at the throne hall, they found the Warlord and his senior officers still present. Standing in formal silence, each one had already removed their ceremonial armor. The lead human, Envoy, clad in simple gray and black, stepped forward and held out a data slate. This is the record, she said. The names, the footage, the evidence. The Warlord said nothing. He didn't need to. Behind him, the great banners of the Dominion still hung from stone pillars. But they had begun to tear in the wind, back in orbit. Earth's fleet remained in position not as conquerors, but as watchers. A single message was sent across all Zorath systems. Translated in their native tongue, Cardal has not been forgotten. What was done there will be answered. This is not a siege. It is an accounting. On Earth, a quiet wave of emotion spread as the images arrived. The palace, untouched. The leaders surrendered. The weapons, unfired. Humanity had not taken revenge. It had taken control. And now, the galaxy was watching, not with fear, but with understanding. This was not the Earth of old, ruled by impulse or pride. This was a patient, calculating power, holding its hand steady until the truth was undeniable. Justice had arrived, and it spoke in silence. Carteo was silent once more, but this time it was not a silence born of violence. It was the quiet of reverence. The summit grounds, once scarred by tragedy, had been restored. The towering crystal spires were rebuilt exactly as they had stood before the massacre. The stage at the center, the same one where Ambassador Kira Lin had given her final words, had been left untouched. Its burn marks preserved beneath a glass memorial dot above the dome. Earth's flag hung beside the symbols of the Galactic Concord and the Zorath Dominion, not as a gesture of unity, but of accountability. This was where the truth would be spoken. The Cardal Tribunal began at sunrise. It was not a show of power. No armies stood at the gates. No fleets circled overhead. only a chamber filled with delegates, witnesses, and survivors. Cameras recorded every word, every pause, and every decision for all of humanity and all the galaxy. To see the Zoroth delegation entered under escort. Their former High Warlord walked at the front, no longer armored, no longer revered. His title stripped, his voice now subject to law not command. Earth's lead representative was not a general, not a politician. She was the daughter of two civilians lost in the Massacre, Mira Lin, niece of the late ambassador. Now a legal advocate chosen by consensus. She stood at the center of the tribunal floor, calm, clear, and prepared. "This is not a trial of vengeance," she said. "It is not punishment for pain. It is accountability for choices. Choices made in arrogance, in secrecy, and in silence." The tribunal lasted 3 days. Records were presented. It's not just of the massacre, but of the orders leading up to it. Internal Zoroth transmissions, military planning files, coded directives, issued under the label of a cultural containment action. The defense did not deny the massacre occurred. They argued instead that it was a ritual response, meant to protect Zoroth traditions from what they saw as cultural erosion. But as Myra Lynn held up the transmission logs, her voice did not waver. This was not tradition. This was strategy. You silenced 10,000 voices not out of fear, but to send a message. She stepped back. Now hear ours. One by one, testimonies followed. Families from Earth, diplomats from allied species, even former Zoroth civilians, now dissidents, who had learned the truth and chosen to speak. A Radari scholar, who had once worked alongside human scientists at Cartel, testified from the same seat where his human counterpart had died. His voice broke only once. "I was saved," he said, quietly, "because I was not the target." At the close of the 3rd day, the Zoroth defendants were given the chance to speak. Some refused, some attempted to justify. One former Command Overseer Talon Vex stepped forward and lowered his eyes. "I believed in our supremacy," he said. "I was wrong, and I will carry that weight." The verdicts were delivered by a panel of 12-6 from Earth, 6 from the Concord. The results were unanimous. Command-level guilt was established. Sentencing would not be execution. Instead, Earth issued a demand for a restoration project, one that the Zoroth themselves would lead. Not through money, not through labor, but through education. Through public acknowledgement, through open memorials in every Zoroth system, teaching future generations about what was done and why it must never happen again. This, Myra Lynn said, was the difference between conquest and justice outside. Across Cartel, thousands of candles lit the walkways as the sun set. No speeches followed. No celebrations, only remembrance. Above, Earth ships departed the system, their mission complete. Not in fire, in clarity. The tribunal had not healed the wound, but it had named it. Sometimes, that is how healing begins. The verdict had echoed across the stars. The Cartel tribunal was over, and the galaxy was watching. But Earth did not celebrate with grand speeches or parades. Instead, it embraced a new responsibility, the difficult work of leadership without domination, a voice without force. In the weeks that followed, Earth's diplomats and educators traveled to Zoroth systems and beyond, delivering lectures, opening forums, and building bridges where once there had been only suspicion. The restoration project was underway, not as an imposition, but as a shared commitment to remembrance and progress. Admiral Vance, once the commander of the Resolute Shadow, now served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Her mission was no longer to direct fleets, but to foster unity. "We acted not because we sought vengeance," she told a gathering of young diplomats on a neutral station, "but because we recognized that forgiveness must be earned through truth, not forgotten in silence." The High Warlord's name had faded from Zorath's history books, replaced by those who spoke openly about responsibility and change. Former dissidents, survivors, and new leaders shaped a narrative that promised accountability would never again be sacrificed to pride among the stars. Earth's influence grew, but it was the influence of example, not empire. Children of multiple species studied Terran history alongside their own. The stories of Cartel were included in every curriculum, a warning and a reminder that peace was fragile and must be defended with vigilance. Even the Galactic Concord evolved. Policies on diplomatic immunity, conflict resolution, and interspecies accountability were rewritten, informed by the lessons of Earth's actions. But the galaxy also understood something deeper. Earth had become a new kind of power, one that refused to fight on instinct, that demanded justice without bloodshed, that sought resolution over retaliation, and with that, it earned respect. At home, humanity faced its own challenges. The scars of loss lingered. The debate over how far justice should go was ongoing. But a quiet confidence had settled in. For the first time in centuries, Earth's people understood their place in the cosmos. Not as victims, not as conquerors, but as guardians of a promise. No massacre would ever be ignored again. On a clear night beneath a sky filled with stars, Mira Lynn stood at the memorial on Cartel. Her uncle's name etched among the honored. She thought of the long journey from pain to justice, and she spoke softly, knowing the galaxy was listening. Justice is not the end, she said. It is the beginning of a future we all must build together. The stars beyond twinkled in quiet agreement. Earth had spoken. The galaxy had heard, and the verdict was clear. No more forgiveness without justice. No more silence without remembrance. No more forgetting.